Hey guys, Tuesday morning, it's your buddy Choppadong here, and I represent DFSArmy.com, one-stop shopping, all things daily fantasy sports, as you know. I want to talk a little bit of MLB made easy for you today, and we'll run through the system and maybe run through the optimizer again, just like yesterday, because really and truly, you don't get better at something unless you build a repeatable process. Every coach in the world will tell you that. I'm a coach inside DFS Army. I tell every member that I come across. You have to build a repeatable process. And in that process, you can make small changes, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but you have to have that solid foundation to come back to. Solid athletic stance in baseball, solid technique in golf. Whatever it is, if you play real sports, you understand this. You understand that having that foundation to go back to of fundamentals will actually make you a solid player. It gives you something to build upon. Now, we build upon ownership is a lot of what we do here in terms of cash lineups and even GPP lineups, using ownership as a base. Whether you're a contrarian and you like to go against the grain, or you're a chalk gobbler like I am and you like to sit within the ownerships, it doesn't really matter which way you play as long as you kind of do similar things day in and day out. Constantly track your progress, constantly watch what you're doing, watch your success, give it a little bit of a run. Don't change every day, but maybe every week, every 2 weeks or something, maybe make a slight change. You can become a better player very, very easily, and that's what we talk about all the time. We're moving to Discord on June 1st, I should tell you that. I'll post a free link to Discord in the description of this video, along with membership info if you want to become a VIP, whatever. As always, I appreciate it when you like and subscribe the video. That helps me comment. That helps me get a little bit of feedback and give you guys what you want, because I like to do a lot of teaching for free, giving back to the community. But of course, I do a lot more of the detailed type of stuff behind the paywall, because after all, daddy gots to get paid. All that stuff aside, let's run through the process a little bit today and let's see where it goes. We're also going to be doing out on Twitter. If you follow me out on Twitter at Choppadong, we do a DFS chat every Tuesday at noon Eastern. And if you have access to Twitter and you want to fire off some questions, we'll talk about anything. We'll answer anything, for an hour or so. And we'll see if we can't build that up and make that another way that we give back to the community on top of everything that we already do. Setting the DFS MLB process isn't that hard. And yesterday, let's try and power through this. I'll show you when we get to the optimizer, kind of what we did yesterday. If I go to the Fanduel pitchers and sort by time, it's like a 13-game slate today. It's really pretty crazy. I'm hoping that 7:05 is the start time and those early games are not included, because that's typically what I do when I'm starting my research process. It's usually correct. It's not correct every day. Sometimes the slate starts a half hour early or whatever. But we're looking at Jacob deGrom, Corbin Burns, Musgrove, Scherzer, Haney. I don't know if this is the Will Smith that's pitching today or not. Savali, whatever, Gausman. These are the guys that are carrying the higher K scores, right? Over 500. I can take these top 4 or 5 guys, and I can pretty much X out the rest. I eat chalk with pitchers. I get different with my stacks. I believe that stacks win you tournaments and pitchers don't. So you could clearly use every pitcher and let the optimizer fill in due to price wherever it wants to, but you could also just knock out the top 5 all the way down to the top 5 pitchers in terms of ownership or in terms of K score or whatever, and just run with that. Totally up to you, okay? But that's about all the time I spend on pitching. So I might come down to Haney today and probably X out this Will Smith, and that'd probably be about that. It really doesn't have to be that hard. These are going to be my chalky cash game type of pitchers anyway. These guys are going to be at the top of the leaderboards, and if I eat deGrom, I eat deGrom. If I pivot down for 2K and get Corbin Burns, I get Corbin Burns. It doesn't matter to me. I'll see that when I get into the optimizer. I come down here, I sort by W score, and like I said yesterday, I do 2 things. I bring the W score to the top, and now I can target Richards, Kramer, Matz, Skubal, Keller, Miley, whatever. Those guys have bad WOBAs for themselves in combination with the offense they're facing today that carries a higher WOBA for the slate. So that tells us, just like Blake Snell yesterday, if you remember, I said he's got a high K score, but he had a high WOBA. We noticed that late and said that's actually going to be a little dicey situation where he could go either way. He could pitch well, he could blow up. Well, he got clobbered for 5 runs yesterday. That's what happens when the WOBA score is high. It tells you that there are guys that are vulnerable, and on a big slate, it's usually the names you expect, but on smaller slates, it can be surprising. It can lead you to targeting a Snell, getting contrarian almost accidentally because you're just following the numbers and doing what they tell you to do, and then wind up on a good stack last night that had leverage. That happens all the time. But on big slates, things are pretty straightforward. So if I scroll over here, I'm looking at the opponent: Atlanta, Minnesota, New York, Cleveland, Tampa, Washington, LA. These should be popular stacks tonight. They should be theoretically fundamentally sound stacks tonight. But another way that you can do this is sort ascending order, bring the cheap pitchers to the top, and you can stack against these guys under, say, 6,500. And that Boston, San Francisco, Oakland, LA, again, Minnesota, Cleveland, Mets, whatever, these guys are all in play as well as stacks too. So there are a couple of different ways to target it. You can use the pricing algorithm against itself and stack against the cheap pitchers. You can go grab ownership reports. You can use W score. You can do all of that stuff. But I would encourage you to take one way, make it your primary way, and do that for a while and track the results. You may think of something along the way. Ooh, what if I did this? And test it and find something nobody else knows. That's how DFS. That's how the DFS war gets won. Is you jump ahead of the curve and then everybody else plays catch up when they finally find out what it is that you're doing. But that said, that is easy enough to do pitchers. I'm going to open up the optimizer in another window to get it set up for us here, because we're going to be there here pretty quickly. Come down, filter out those early games again. And now I'm going to take the 7-day WOBA trends, and I'm going to come down here to greater than 399. Yesterday we used greater than or equal to. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what you do. Set those numbers to weed out all of those guys that are not hitting for a 400. Get out of there. A 400 or better WOBA and a 200 or better ISO over those 7 days. Okay, you can use 14-day numbers. We did that early in the season when the numbers weren't really established. But now that I've got a 14-day number to compare to, scroll down here. Oh, big list. We need, okay, on a day like today when we have a bigger list than that 20 to 40 names that I look for, and it's not usually 40 names. It could be, but it's not. I want to cut this list down. So what would I do? Well, if I want to open the list up and I kind of relax the requirements, well, today I'm going to tighten them up. We'll go to 415 in that WOBA and see if that doesn't knock some of these guys down. Still maybe not quite big enough or short enough the list, big enough numbers on the list. So let's go to 425. And we'll keep cutting it down. And now we'll come over maybe to ISO. And let's cut off the 215. See if we can't cut some of the other guys out of there. See, you can see it changing a little. So it is shrinking some. But if I wanted to, I can keep going to 420, 430, 440, 210, 220, 230, and keep cutting it down till it's the list that I want. Now, that doesn't mean that these guys that I'm cutting off are bad plays. They're great plays. You can include them. But if you're boosting all of these guys' projections in your optimizers, you're watering it down if you're doing that to too many players. So you want to kind of keep it in that sweet spot, 20, 30, maybe 40 names tops, and go from there. Now, I'm also going to slide over here, use the team alphabetization, sort by ascending, and get Atlanta, Baltimore, Boston. Only one Boston. Boston's cooled off some. Chicago, Cincinnati, KC, LA, 3 LAs, 1, 2, 3 Minnesotas, 1, 2, 3, 4 Oaklands, 1, 2, 3 San Diego's, a bunch of Tampa. That's 5 Tampa Bay guys. So this is also letting me know who the hot teams are kind of throughout their lineup top to bottom. And those are the types of lineups that can really do some scoring in bunches because it's hot hitter after hot hitter after hot hitter coming to the plate, as opposed to maybe a one-off. You know, somebody like Verdugo makes for a great one-off in the Boston stack. You know, maybe he works out. Maybe Grandal works out in the Chicago stack. But it's not that I wouldn't stack these teams. If they're facing bad pitchers and they've got high W scores, I would definitely stack them. But I'm not expecting them to do the damage as if I found like Oakland in a good matchup tonight. I would expect Oakland to do pretty well. So these are all things that you're entering into your head as you're starting to maybe take notes, starting to formulate your slate, and waiting for lineups to confirm, waiting for ownership reports to come out, waiting for things like this to happen. You're just getting an entry-level game plan on a big slate today as to who I'm going to be looking for and who I'm just going to cut off and throw away automatically today. Your brain works pretty well when you compartmentalize and you just cut off big chunks and throw them away. Those that aren't likely to produce great results because it would be a very, very outlier performance in doing so, like a Dwayne Dedman last night, right? Okay, so you were wrong, but that happens. If you stay within the bigger compartments and throw away big chunks at a time, you save yourself a ton of time and you make your research more efficient, which means you can process the information quickly, you can play different sports, you can play different formats, you can do a lot of that stuff, okay? Now, based on the different formats, let's talk cash games for a minute. I like all these players, but I like to use ownership numbers within those cash games. And last night I built a lineup for cash that was, I want to say, based on our ownership projections, was around a 160, 170, and those are GPP numbers. But when it comes down to cash games, the ownerships spike. They go way up. Everybody knows the good players to play. It's why cash is pretty tough these days. But it wasn't hard to cash if you use that to your advantage. I saw some lineup sellers out there on the money line in the 50-50s. I was in at about 100.6 points or something like that. About 8 or 10 guys that are lazy and bought lineups ended up tying for the same score. They set the money line, good for them. I think instead of $1.80, they got back 95 cents because they all tied like schmucks. But that said, it created a glom of people to watch. And so I went through and I added up all of their ownerships, 40% here, 30% here, 80% here, whatever. Guys being used at that rate. And the overall total score, instead of like a 155, 160, was a 440. And that's a massive number. That's fine. If that's where everybody is, those are the players you should be largely playing yourself. Maybe make a pivot or two, but not intentionally. My lineup I built was a 420. Fine. It's close enough to that number. It's only 5% different. It's close enough to that number that it's a chalky lineup too. And that's why it was a little bit different in its big chalk. Just a little bit different combination. Maybe a few didn't stack, players as much or whatever. And that lineup went to 12th place as opposed to the 42nd place. All the lineup sellers were jumped over all those little suckers. And the beautiful part about it was it cashed with ease by eating chalk. And we've done that at about a 61% clip, back testing through April and through May. And that is proving to be a very, very, very effective way to build lineups based on ownership numbers. If that interests you, obviously come inside. We'll talk about it. But here's how we do it, just so you know. I don't think I have ownership numbers today this early in the morning, but I would sort this column by ownership. Maybe we need to go back here and we need to back test. I'm going to run out of time real quick. But if I call up yesterday's main and come down here and sort by projected ownership, what I did was I uncheck everybody here, right? And I come in here and I start checking back the players that I know should be in those lineups, right? Based on ownership, the high ownership guys are guys that should be in these lineups. So if I try to do this really quickly and just knock off a few of these guys, just to show you what I'm talking about. Top 3, top 4, top 5 guys in all of these lineups, whatever. It's pretty much going to take the top chalk. It just needs a little bit of room for value to make it all fit under the salary cap. That's all it needs to happen. So now that I've got those guys figured out, I can make about 5 to 10 lineups, one unique player, maybe even 2, a little bit of randomness, no randomness, totally up to you, and click optimize. And once it jams out these lineups here, I can take the fantasy points and sort by percentage of ownership, and up to 240. Okay, so my 160 was early off of those numbers. Running again closer to lock, you get like a 240. And this lineup has a lot of those same guys in it. It had a little bit more Lariano and whatever else. The final score was a 142. It beat my 125. This was a better lineup last night than the others. So using these ownerships are going to cash. Cash line was 100.6, and this thing ended up being a 142. This one was a 97, so it does miss as well, but it's going to hit more than half the time, typically by hiding. That ownership gives you that insulation, that protection. And if you want, you can take something like this and even build, instead of a 240, you can build for a minimum lineup of, say, 200 and put your cap on there of, say, 225 and build within that range. And when you build within that range, you're going to be close to the chalk but not on the chalk. You're going to sit here with a 229, a 230, a 240, and you're still getting those same scores, but you're just different enough. You can start winning 3-man leagues, 10-man leagues, 20-man leagues. If you want to set that even further apart, 20% off those numbers, you can start winning GPPs with those numbers. But you still need a large percentage of chalk to do any damage today in today's game. That's a lot of the way that it is most of the time. If these strategies pique your interest, like and subscribe to the video, come inside, be a VIP, talk to me. I will talk to you all day long. But follow us out there on Twitter. Also participate in DFS chat. You want to ask questions out there? Ask questions out there. Join our free Discord channel. We'll answer questions in there. Our job is to help make you a better player. Tuesday, May 25th. Peace out, homies. Talk to you on